Hi, my name is Chenue Gill, and I live in the beautiful Napa Valley Hills, and you can see some of the madrone and bay trees behind me. It's really beautiful here. Today I am making my first ever video, and I'm also giving my first ever testimonial for Brian Ridgway and the Level 5 Mentoring Program. I think that this Level 5 Mentoring Program has changed my life so dramatically that I felt like I wanted to share it with others in hopes that it could make a huge leap in consciousness for them like it has for me. I have been like Brian. I've searched and I've spent money and I've spent years looking for spiritual truth, and it's been elusive. I've learned, I think, parts of it and gotten closer to it, but never felt like I really kind of got the whole picture about things. In fact, I wasn't even sure anymore that spiritual truth could be totally known, that perhaps you'd get a little close to it, and then there's more, and you get a little close to it and there's more, and perhaps maybe in this lifetime it's just not even possible to get to the whole picture. But now I believe a totally different thing, and I want to share that with you. Something that's brought me so much joy and happiness, it makes me feel good to share it. I'm going to share some of my story. I'm going to be intimate with you, and I'm going to share personal things, and I'm happy to do that if it helps you discover something new in your life. I'm not worried about sharing that, and then after I get finished, I'm going to show you how this Level 5 mentoring has transformed some of my story and a very short period of time. I began a very serious spiritual path in my very early 30s after I had a near-death experience. And in that experience, I learned that our consciousness goes on after our life in this world, and it profoundly changed my life. It especially changed my parenting, because once you discover that the spirit and the soul belong to someone else and to some other thing, you stop having sort of a vested interest in making anyone like you, but rather what you want to do is help them to be all that they can be. So it really changed me a lot. After that, I got my professional credentials in social work, and I went to work for Catholic Charities, and I started with one-on-one help with the elderly and the aging and the disabled, and there were so many of them, so many people that were suffering, that pretty soon I got into designing programs and setting up programs that I thought would help bigger numbers of people. And when that still seemed kind of futile, I went to work in social action, trying to shift policies at a bigger level so that even more people could get help. And those were the days in the early 70s when we thought we were right on the brink of everybody having the medical care that they needed, the shelter they needed, the clothes they needed, the education they needed, and even a guaranteed annual income. And we got really close. But you can see that in 40 years since then, it's just deteriorated terribly until there are even more people in poverty than ever before. So that dream was kind of lost. One thing I started to notice, so after that experience with Catholic Charities, I decided that maybe I would set up programs to help train more people to be like myself, not necessarily professional social workers, but people that could learn basic skills and theology and be in somewhat of a full-time ministry helping people in their local areas. So we set up, I was on a team, we set up a 3-year program to train ministers. It was an intensive program. It was quite comprehensive, and it covered theology and scripture and church teachings and sacramental life, but it also covered helping and various techniques for that. So they took a 3-year program, and of course, since I was on the team, I sat in on the 3-year program, and I did that 3 times. So I had 9 years of all kinds of theology and spiritual input in those 9 years. And one of the things I noticed with the adults that were taking this program is that some of them seemed to live in a place where they had created their own suffering, and they didn't really want to give that up. Even if you encouraged them to give it up, they would sort of hang on to it. So I became interested in possibly discovering spiritual things that might help people give up this pain and suffering that they sort of self-created in their lives. You might call it, I guess, neurotic suffering, but anyway, I call it false pain, false suffering. So I went to work for the Christian Brothers, and we designed retreat programs and days of relaxation and meditation and input, and then I did spiritual counseling for quite a while in there, and it was very full and a very good time. I also, in all of that time, I did lots of exploration and study. I went through the entire Jungian collected works twice. I did Jungian analysis. I learned Gestalt therapy. I learned reality therapy. I did hypnosis and learned hypnosis. Groff breathing, Reichian breathing. I went to Esalen. I went to the Institute of Creational Spirituality in Oakland. And just the biggest thing I probably did was buy books. I went through whole categories of things like healing prayer and various approaches to spirituality and just anything you could think of in that whole area. Mysticism really, really intrigued me. The mystics were kind of as close to what I saw spiritual truth at as anybody I could discover. So I spent thousands of dollars and lots of time working on myself and trying to share that with other people. At the end of this period of time, I decided I wasn't really living an authentic life, and so I gave up a sort of Southern Belle existence in Memphis, Tennessee, married to a big, powerful trial lawyer, and divorced him, and then went to California to see if I couldn't do something really completely in alignment with what I thought I was called to do. I really even wasn't sure what that was, but I knew I wasn't living it there. So I packed up and moved to California, and then a very big, sort of mysterious set of circumstances led me to find my soulmate. It was just astonishing to me. I met Barry Gill, who had been a teacher in Napa for 30 plus years, and he had just bought a natural food store, and after we got together, he asked me if I would be his partner, which I thought was pretty ridiculous since I smoked at the time, and I drank coffee, and I ate chocolate, and I wasn't a vegetarian. But in any event, we were both such seekers, and Barry had even once been in the seminary, and he had studied many of the same things I had, and it was like we just had this instant connection. So Barry was 25 years older, 24 years older than I was, and he had only 20% lung capacity. So from the very beginning, there was a little worry that maybe we wouldn't have a very long time together, but we ended up having 25 years, and they were glorious. In this time, we began to study alternative healing methods of a different sort. I became a trained herbalist, and Barry learned all he could learn about water and food, and then we both sort of did the vitamins, and we did Qigong and yoga, and we did Akita and visualization and centering prayer and shamanism and, you know, you name it. We explored it, and together we spent a lot of time and a lot of money, and our library just grew exponentially between the two of us. Now there was more than one collector, there were two of us. So and then we did a lot of healing rituals and ceremonies and with friends and with other people, and experienced a lot of healing. I think if Barry hadn't worked really hard on staying well and staying strong, he never would have lived as long as he did. And he wanted to be here for me. In the meantime, we both studied spiritual things. Barry was a poet. He read a lot of poetry. Barry was also a scholar, so he read a lot of very heavy theology. I kept reading mystical writings, esoteric Christianity, Lives of the Saints more and more, and we just began to collect even more information and more wisdom, but still there seemed to be something elusive. Anyway, we had a very successful business. We did well. We didn't get wealthy by any manner of means, but we had enough money to pay our bills, to do some of these projects that we wanted to do, and we even got to travel a little bit. And if we could have lived out our lives that way, if Barry could have lived as long as I lived, then I think we would have just been very happy and not worried about the fact that we hadn't gotten to the bottom of spiritual truth. We were living such an easy life together that it wouldn't have made much difference for us. We felt the holiness between us. Daily, we fed each other's souls and nourished each other. So, you know, we both felt really full. It was really beautiful. But life was not meant to be that simple for us. There were times when Barry got really sick. We'd have some scary trips to the emergency room, and once he was on a ventilator, unable to breathe on his own. And one time I just prayed with him and read things that he had written down, and we went from one breath to the next because he wasn't even sure if he was going to draw another breath. And during these periods of his illness, I would get this darkness. This terrible fear would come over me, and I would want to pull back. And it's very hard sometimes to love somebody unconditionally who you think you might lose. And because you love them so much, you're afraid to lose them and feel the pain. So there's this tension between those two spectrums. And every time I would try to find the courage, and I did find the courage to love him totally and keep on with this process. And things were okay. I would get out of the darkness of that, and he'd get well, and we'd go for long periods of time before it would hit again. But I brought another kind of darkness into the relationship, one that Barry knew nothing about in terms of his own experience. He had never had anything like this. From as long as I can remember, even from childhood, I had this terrible inner fear of, I never even could name it. It usually hit me in my body. Later, I could talk about it, and I could engage sometimes in the energy to try to discover more about it. But one thing I was clear is that it really didn't have a lot to do with my personal trauma in my life. I did have trauma when I was a child, but nothing ever as terrifying as what this energy was. This energy would freeze my diaphragm, take my breath away, make me feel like I was dying, that I was going to be annihilated in any instance. And its bottom line seemed to be, just die now and save yourself a whole lot of trouble and misery. And when it would strike, it would just be so total. And unfortunately, one of the triggers that would start it up were money issues. And when we first started the store, we had a lot of money issues, you know, the startup kind of worries, and I would have to struggle with those. And Barry was excellent at being present to me. He would just be with me and love me and stay and not try to fix it, and eventually it would correct itself. Sometimes the drama was so over the top that I'm sure Barry probably stuffed back some chuckles because I looked ridiculous when these things would happen. And afterwards I could laugh too, but I certainly couldn't laugh in the middle of it. I was too terrified. And eventually it eased up because our finances were pretty secure. We had a nest egg. I had what I thought was enough money for my retirement, and for Barry to retire too if he wanted to earlier. And so it kind of went away, and I just tended to forget that it was there, and didn't worry about it a lot. But three years ago, things really changed. We found out that Whole Foods was coming to Napa, and I had seen what had happened to all the hardware stores, the mom and pop hardware stores, when the big box stores came to town. We had 2 independents here, and I just didn't think Napa was going to be able to take care or support 2 independents in one huge store. And so I got pretty despairing about it and really, really worried. And I tried to do things. I tried to sell the house. I tried to leverage the house into reinvesting, into recapitalizing a little bit. I tried various different things to make the money more secure, and I couldn't get anything done. I couldn't make it happen. I looked around and sort of panicked to see if there was an alternative thing that we could do or that I could do that would provide an income for me for the rest of my life. And I decided to open a spiritual art gallery. It was something I had thought about many times, but had never really gotten very far with. And I thought it was a beautiful idea. And it was a beautiful idea, and I did it, and I opened it, and it was gorgeous, and people loved it. And 2 months after it opened, the stock market crashed, and people not only didn't have money to buy art, they didn't have money to buy vitamins either. So both stores just started to suffer terribly. Meanwhile, rents had gone up exponentially over those few years, and even after the market crashed, landlords were totally unwilling to work with you and readjust the rents or anything. It was like they just didn't get it, or they didn't care. And I'm sure as I tell this story, many of you went through similar things during that period of time. And then the other thing was that we were getting older, and so we had more salaries because we had to hire more help. And so we had bigger salaries, and my health insurance at that time, because I was an independent business person, got up in the range of $1,400 a month. And I was very scared not to have it because I just knew something terrible might happen, and then it would wipe out that savings I had. So things were difficult, and a lot of days, because this was money and it triggered my darkness, I would go home, crawl in bed, pull the covers up, and literally just about stop breathing. My diaphragm would freeze to the point where I could barely breathe. And I just went through some horrible, horrible moments. And again, Barry was with me. He was present. Barry was the kind of man who worried not at all about anything. He just was so peaceful. And so I felt like I had to do all the worrying. And but anyway, he was with me, and we kind of plugged our way through it. Finally, very early on, I closed the gallery. And then I managed to keep the natural food store open for a year. But finally it became clear to me that that wasn't going to work. By the end of 1 year, I had lost $500,000 in net worth through the 2 ventures. And I just, it was kind of like, what did I do to make this happen? What in the world went on that could change my life so dramatically and make me feel so horrible in such a short period of time? Well, anyway, last year in March, we closed the natural food store, and during that process of liquidation, which took a couple of months, I began to notice a tremendous change in Barry. He started to be absent, and he was one of the most present people you could ever hope to meet. So that was a real tip-off. He would go out to run an errand, and he would kind of forget that errand and maybe do 2 or 3 other things that weren't nearly as critical, but still he kept going in his own way. And after the store closed during the summer months, Barry almost became translucent with light. You could just see the light coming from his being and radiating out of his skin and his bodysuit, as I call it. He continued to read very, very heavy things. He was reading God After Darwin, which, if any of you have read it, I can't get my head around it. It's just too much. But he was plugging away with that and a couple of other very intense things. He was cleaning out his office, which was really out of character, and giving away things to friends. He started meditating a good part of the day, and he would be in ecstasy. It was so joyful for him. He started having these dreams that were just amazingly wonderful and beautiful. And all this time, I didn't say it much out loud, but I knew he was entering into his transition. And I thought, well, this is going to be the winter that Barry goes, maybe. And I'd always thought it would be winter because people with lungs have the most trouble in winter. So, sure enough, around Thanksgiving last year, his decline started. And it wasn't his lungs. He had, of all things, a bowel obstruction. And then he fell and broke his hip. And then they let him fall in the hospital, and he dislocated the new hip and almost bled to death when they had to reset that. And then it was pneumonia and bladder infections and an enlarged prostate, and it just kind of went on and on. And Barry and I talked about everything. I mean, we talked about dying. We talked about the other side. We talked, the spirit world. And I would ask him over and over again, are you ready? Do you need me to do anything? And he would say, I don't feel ready yet. I don't feel ready. He was even saying that at Christmas time. But all his children came, and he finished up all these little things that he had always wanted to take care of with his kids, and he finished those up, and they had some wonderful times together in the hospital. And at the first of the year, we transferred him to a nursing home so he could have rehab to get back on his feet. I wasn't real confident about that, but I couldn't do that at home, even any little pieces of it. But so we went to the nursing home. And for a while, he really tried, but he just kept being sick and not doing real well. And by Valentine's Day, he just really wasn't eating, and he wasn't interested in any kind of physical activity. He didn't want to get out of bed particularly. And so that week, I revisited the whole "Are you ready to leave?" thing, and Barry looked at me and he said, "You know how much I love you." And I said, "I do. I know totally how much you love me." And I said, "But we've been through a lot these last couple of years, and I've made it through it. I mean, I hadn't been very graceful at times, and I certainly am not real excited about the future right now, but I will make it, and I'll be okay." And if you're ready to go, now is as good a time as any. It's never going to be great for me, but I love you, and I want what's best for you. So, and I said, I will be okay. So he looked at me so lovingly, and he said, you know, what I really want is to go home. And I said, yeah, that sounds right. So we both knew what that meant. That means you go home with hospice when you're in that place, and that they take you off all the medicines that you've been on. And so on Friday, we went home, and Barry was so happy to be in his room again with his altar and all his books. And we had fixed it all up, and the grandchildren had colored pictures for the walls and done everything. And he was just so happy. Saturday, we had all the kids out, some of our best friends out, for pizza and beer. And Barry was very present to everybody and just fully alive right that day. And then that night, his breathing started to get very difficult. So I called the hospice nurse, and she came out, and we put him on the last meds, the in-time meds. And the next day, Sunday, I crawled into bed with Barry, and I stayed there all day, curled up next to him. And his eyes would look out in front of him about 3 feet, and about 3 feet off the ground. And sometimes he would point, and mostly he was smiling, and his eyes were just so beautiful. And if I spoke to him, he would roll his eyes around and look at me. And then I thought, you know what? I'm interrupting him. And I don't want to. As much as I want to connect with him, I don't want to interrupt this process because he's making this transition. So I stopped talking to him. And that night he went deeply asleep and took his last breath at 5:30 the next morning. So I stayed strong through the vigil. We kept him at home for a while that day until everybody had come up to the house. And then we had the mass that he wanted, the way he wanted it. We had a memorial for him, and people came to visit, and I gave away all of his things to people that he loved. And I just did fine. I was just this really strong spirit during that period. And then it was all over. Everybody left. Everybody went home. I was all alone in the house that we had lived in all those years. And I cratered. I just simply cratered. And I cried more than I knew that I could possibly cry. The pain of grief felt like physical pain in my body, like somebody had ripped my insides out. It was like I felt like I'd been stabbed or wounded somehow. And so anyway, I got in the hot tub that night. I try to get in the hot tub twice a day to pray and meditate, and most days I manage it. That night I got in the hot tub, and I talk to Barry every time I get in, but I just started to pray out loud and say, you know, I can't for the life of me think why I would want to stay here without Barry. It's like the best part of my life is over. This has been the best 25 years anybody could ever have, and I don't want to be here. And I thought, I'll never have another soul connection like that, not in this life. And I was thinking, well, I'll never be loved again, and I'll never love again like that. And I just couldn't see any reason not to leave, not to go and join him. And so I got kind of quiet, and one of the things I'd been expecting was Barry to come visit me, because we had talked about that a lot before he left, and so far it hadn't happened at that point. And so I sort of listened. I thought, well, okay, Barry, tell me what you think. Well, Barry didn't come through, but this wonderful friend of mine that I'd lost a year ago, one of my closest, most hilarious friend, came through, and she said, you can't leave now. She said, you just absolutely can't leave now. It is not your time. There is still something that you are supposed to be doing there. and you can't go. You can't come. She said, but when you do, when you come eventually, she said, your dad and Barry and I, and she said, a lot of other people, she said, we will come dancing to meet you. And I was kind of astonished. And then Chenue went on to tell me all the wonderful things she's doing there and what kind of fun she's having. And it's like, oh my gosh, she's having this huge party. Wherever that is, that spirit hangs out. You know, I'm not clear about that, but it's somewhere, and I have a feeling it's just right here. It's just a light spectrum that we probably can't see. Well, I continued to have grief and to struggle with things, and I ate so much sugar, I gained 30 pounds, so I know level 5 mentoring is going to help with that too. I'm going to be able to shed that very rapidly now. But things were not wonderful. However, I sort of started to struggle my way back, and I had a couple of dreams that indicated that the third part of my life was really going to be something to pay attention to, that it was going to be something of interest to me. I don't know if I'll be loved in that way again, and I may not have another soulmate, and that's perfectly okay at this point for me, but I did have the sense that something good could happen for the first time. I kind of got it, and I gave up that whole idea that I would leave now. And by the summer in June, my daughter, who's a lawyer and a single mom, and I decided we'd merge households because we could save some money and we could both do parenting to the kids, and they could have grandma around, and even when mom wasn't able to be there sometimes. So we decided that we would merge households. I packed up everything, most of my library. I packed up most of my spiritual tools. I packed up my art. I make jewelry. I packed up all of that. Put everything in storage to get ready to rent my house out so we could make this move. And the story of that move is sort of part of this puzzle in some way. We couldn't find the place that we needed. We couldn't find either the right size, or it wasn't set up right for a couple of adults and a couple of kids, or we came in second on the house, or we missed it by a day, it was just a series of things. Even now, late into the fall, we still haven't found it. And now, for like weeks and weeks, there hadn't even been one house that we wanted to look at. It's like, okay, what's going on? So in the meantime, I start feeling perky again. And I'm sitting here out in the country, pretty isolated. And I don't have anything to do. I can't go get a job because I'm going to be moving, and I don't want to have to commute an hour to a new place back and forth and spend that kind of money on gas at the moment. I can't do my jewelry because everything's in storage. And I'm just so antsy, I'm going nuts. I've got all this creativity and this energy, and thinking, I signed up for an ombudsman course and training, and I've been buying some findings and pieces for jewelry, but it's not the same as going ahead and doing it. So as a result of having too much time on my hands, I guess you could say, I started being on the internet more than I usually am. A lot of times I just delete things, and I don't have even enough time to read some of the regular newsletters I get. But anyway, I get this newsletter on the in my email that I usually get. It's not wasn't an odd kind of newsletter. It was just one regular newsletter that I usually or often delete. And so now I think, well, I'll just read this because, well, I have nothing else to do. I can read my email for once. And so here's this email from this really pretty credible teaching person that I know. And the very first part of the email is this blurb about get unstuck today, and by using this very new process and by this very interesting man. And you know, if you've ever wanted to be unstuck, do it now. And I'm sitting there thinking, well, that's interesting. You know, I'm stuck in the country. I'm stuck not having enough money. I'm stuck not having anything to do with my creativity. I'm stuck in the residual grief process. I mean, who could be more stuck than I was feeling at that moment? So I click on it, and it takes me to this offer of a free webinar. Well, I didn't know what a webinar was. I do now, but I didn't then. And here's this thing that's offering this free session to get unstuck. Well, I just sign up for it. I mean, I think, great. I don't care how I get unstuck. If I do, you know, it's just perfect timing. So I make a note on my calendar. I'm going to watch this free webinar that's coming up in a couple of days. And I forget and I miss it. So I don't get to watch it live. I download it. And so I download it and start to listen to it a couple of days later. And within 3 minutes, I get an answer to something that has been driving me crazy. And that is, why did I open that art gallery when I did? Why did the market crash right at that moment? Why has everything sort of been in decline mode or dying mode or, you know, shedding mode? But mostly, why did the art gallery fail? That was the big question. And within 3 minutes, I knew the answer. This man, Brian Ridgway, was telling me the exact answer. And the answer is that I opened that gallery out of fear and scarcity. I had never done anything in my life out of fear and scarcity. Nothing. This was the first time. And I was panicked. And when you're panicked, your mind doesn't hear your little intuitive voices that usually come through. Your mind can't hear any alternative suggestions. And the fact is that if I had opened that gallery online, on the internet, I think it would still be in business and it would be very successful. But I couldn't think outside the box. All I could think about was bricks and mortar. And in the end, it was this exorbitant rent that I had committed to that brought me down in that business and led to the failure. And it was fear and scarcity. And I thought, how many times in my whole life has somebody given me a major breakthrough answer? I can't even remember when that happened before. Usually my breakthrough answers come from within. So here was one in 3 minutes, okay? And this is just a free seminar, okay? So I'm sitting there and I'm thinking, okay, I'm going to wait for the pitch. You know, how much is this going to cost? Because my experience of people that want to help you get ahead is that they are the ones that get ahead by charging exorbitant amounts of money for people who are suffering and in pain. And then the people, you know, plunk out all this money and mostly nothing good ever comes of it for them, you know, and they're still in the same place. And the person that's gotten ahead is the person that sold the program. So I'm thinking, okay, this is just going to cost thousands of dollars. But anyway, I'm going to hang in there and just hear. And lo and behold, Brian Ridgway of Level 5 Mentoring names this very, very nominal sum. It's very small. And I think he really wants to give away this information. He wants to help transform the world because he's not trying to get filthy rich from this. And not only that, this was kind of mind-boggling. I mean, really, it is kind of mind-boggling. He offered a money-back guarantee. If you took this program for 90 days and you didn't feel like you got anything out, he's giving you your full amount of money back. Well, I can't tell you over the years how many helping people I've gone to and say, you know, do you offer a money-back guarantee if this gestalt doesn't work or if this hypnosis, and you know, of course, they all laugh. You know, nobody's ever contemplated giving your money back for anything. and so I thought that was just absolutely over the top. And so I'm convinced, by this moment that this man is doing something really wonderful in a really good way, and that he's totally, totally sincere about it. And the other part was I just had the free session. I hadn't even had the real sessions, whatever that meant. And so I couldn't get my credit card out fast enough. And I thought, I better sign up for this before he finds out that he's said the wrong amount and that he really wants a lot more money than this. And so I signed up, and all of a sudden, I'm a full-fledged member of this. And then I start to worry, I wonder if this man's going to make enough money to even buy the equipment that he needs for all of this. And I kind of got worried that maybe he, wouldn't make it in some way. And I'm feeling bad about him, which is just goofy. But anyway, those were the sort of things that I went through. And I couldn't wait for the first real session. I had a lot of energy and excitement even after this free session. So naturally, I couldn't wait. And I got confused again and missed the live presentation of the first session. So again, I listened to a download. So I got my pen and my paper, and I was sitting there ready to listen, clicked and turned it on. And I couldn't write fast enough. He was saying the most profound things. I was hearing spiritual truth like I had never heard it before. And I just started to soar. I was so amazed and so overwhelmed by what I was hearing. I thought, this is the information I have been looking for all of my life. Not only that, he's given it in these little bite-sized pieces so I can digest it. And the biggest other piece of this mentoring process is that he is giving the means by which you can get rid of the obstacles that keep you from knowing spiritual truth. I mean, how many times have you heard spiritual truth given with the way to get rid of the obstacles? I doubt that you could say you have ever experienced that. And I thought, the obstacles are the reason that we haven't been able to hear the complete truth about the spiritual. As long as those obstacles are still there and the mind is getting in the way, our spirits just can't be open to all that's there. And all of a sudden I realized that I was going to know, and I was already in the process of knowing, complete and utter, total spiritual truth. It's something I've been looking for 66 years, okay? And not only that, I could quit looking for it anymore. I didn't have to keep on looking. I could just start doing it, being it, living it, aligning myself with it. You no longer have to find it, just do it. And here it was. And I was astonished. I was just astonished. And I got off that internet that night and went straight to the hot tub. And I felt this oneness with Barry. I mean, I thought, he and I are one. We've always been one. We always will be one. I am one with the divine. Barry's one with the divine. We were both one with the divine. And all my residual grief was just dissipated. I just felt this joy and love for Barry. And I felt his beingness with me. Doesn't matter really if I see him in a clear way, in a vision or anything like that. He is just with me. And I was joyful. I was just so joyful. And not only that, I was feeling liberated in a way that I just can't remember in years and years and years. I've known some goodness and some happiness, but this was like utter fullness, and I felt full. And I thought, well, the weight will come off, that's for sure. When you're feeling this full, you can't keep eating. And I went in and I got on my email list, and I sent an email to some of my dearest friends to tell them about this Level 5 mentoring in Brian Ridgway. And most of my friends think I'm pretty evolved to begin with. So they were extremely curious that I was saying that I was having major transformation. And they'd also seen me go through the last 3 years, and they were amazed, because my last 3 years have been such a struggle, a constant struggle. I mean, one thing after another. I've only told you some of it. So they were pretty curious, and they're still finding out more about it. So who is Brian Ridgway, and what is Level 5 mentoring? I'm asking myself. Here is some amazing spiritual teacher, lives over there in Hawaii. I don't have any access to him. And then I think, does it really matter who he is? Because, if he can light my fire and he can turn me on to something so profound, what do I care who he is? But the fact is that the more I've looked at his sessions, and I've explored his internet site, and I've seen all the writing that he does to various people. I've seen him respond to people in utter crises. I'm just convinced that he's a man who knows how to spark the light, to bring the match, so to speak, to the candles that need to be lit up. And he's doing it. And it's astonishing. It's a gift. It's a great blessing. And Level 5 mentoring is something really pretty amazing. Well, much more has gone on since that happened maybe a week and a half ago. It seems impossible to me that my life has changed so much in a couple of weeks. But anyway, I was listening to, I think, session 3 maybe, and just very shortly after he had begun it, I realized, I just flashed with the fact that I want to be involved in this work. I want to be involved in doing spiritual mentoring using this Level 5 process. I think it can bring freedom and joy to those people that still live in that self-created suffering, that false suffering, and it can help people to be so transformed that they can even deal with the suffering that comes from without, out in the outer world towards them. And all of a sudden I'm going back to thinking about the aging and the elderly, where I started originally. And I'm thinking about all these people in despair I saw in the nursing home and in the hospital, people who are approaching their transition and who are terribly afraid. I saw people in the nursing home being treated. The people there were good, but they were gathered in a room singing children's Bible songs, and I'm thinking, they're capable of so much more. They're capable of being these light beings, and they can decide how they want to do their end, and it can be joyful, and it can be an amazing example to other people. I thought about all these people in these planned retirement communities who must be getting bored by now. How many exercise classes can you do, or and still say thrilled, or how many art classes can you go to, or how many plastic things can you make to hang in your windows? There's a limit to that, and they could be living with so much more fullness and making so many contributions to the planet. For the last 10 years, I have been gathering with hundreds of crone women in an annual meeting of women from all over the country. Some of them are doing phenomenal things on the planet, just amazing. And these are women that want to age in a conscious way, and they want to age in a way that's been not been done before, just like they wanted to do their marriages and their menopause and all the other things in a way that had never been done before. They want to grow old in a way that's never been done before. And I'm thinking of all the boomers who are so afraid of having a wrinkle or, showing that their body sags a little bit or that their knees have gotten bad. I mean, they're such fear about aging and dying that could be used, all that energy could be used for healing all these things that need to be healed on our planet. And I just get really excited with the idea that this level 5 mentoring can be used to maybe inspire them to change things, to be agents of transformation. And pretty soon the numbers of the aging are just going to be huge. And just think what all that consciousness could do if it were gathered together and focused. And I don't have to tell you that the planet right now has a lot of darkness. And for some of us, it looks like it's darker than we have ever known it before. And a lot of pain and a lot of suffering. And also pain and suffering with people that have never had pain and suffering before. It's brand new to them. And some of us feel in our intuition and in our spirits that something's changing, that something's afoot, that there is energy gathering that might just be working towards a big solution in some way. Some of us feel this, and I personally think that those of us that have gone through the darkness in the last few years have kind of gone through it ahead of some other people in order that we can heal and then lead others through that darkness and out into the light and out into goodness, and be agents of transformation. So I want to say to you, if you've been thinking about being part of this planetary transformation, you want to be part of something that's being born, I urge you to consider looking closely at the Level 5 Mentoring Program and the work that Brian Ridgway is doing. It's phenomenal, and I have personally experienced this transformation in the matter of weeks, even minutes occasionally. And it's just something that I am so grateful for that I want to share. I want to close with some words from the poet Kabir. Kabir was a mystical poet, and one of his books was the first book Barry and I ever shared together when we got together. And Kabir says, why not wake up today? Blessings.